Hi, my name's Heidi Helyard and I'm the author of the book Creative Polymer Clay, published by David and Charles. The book contains a heap of different techniques when working with polymer clay and a whole lot more projects, step-by-step tutorial projects. And today I'm going to do a video of one of the tutorials in the book, which is this torn clay trinket dish. So this project also covers off one of the techniques, which is slab making, and this is a really wonderful, simple, entry-level slab to make that I'm going to show you from start to finish. And not only are we going to make this dish, but we're also going to make these super simple earrings. Okay, going through what you're going to need to make the torn clay trinket dish and little extra is firstly a suitable work surface that is good to work with polymer clay, and that is essentially a non-porous surface. I prefer to work on coated ceramic tiles, glass cutting mats or glass, thick glass, not just picture frame glass, is great as well. You'll need an acrylic roller, and these solid acrylic rollers are great and specifically designed for polymer clay. You'll also need a tissue blade, and I like also having a craft knife on hand and some texturing tools, and these are balling tools. This is a balling tool. You can get these specifically for polymer clay, but also nail art. You can get these all over the place on the internet. So as well as those tools, really simple tools, dishes for like mold to put the clay in order to bake the dish into the right shape. So anything that is heat proof. So this is a glass, heat-proof glass dish that can go in the oven. This is just a ceramic dish. I always keep my eye out when I go to thrift shops and op shops for little dishes like this that I can use for different sizes and depths and things like that. So a dish of your choosing. So they're the tools. It's really simple. You really hardly need anything at all. As far as clay goes, you'll need a decent amount of clay for the background of the slab that will then become the trinket dish. I'm going to use black, and I use Sculpey Primo black, and then I've chosen 4 accent colours. I've chosen Sculpey Primo turquoise, Sculpey Primo periwinkle, and Sculpey Primo wasabi, and some white as well. So you'll only need a small amount of these pieces of clay, but you will need a decent amount of this clay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to condition this black clay, the background clay. So now conditioning polymer clay cannot be used straight out of the packet. You can see it's quite stiff, and it crumbles and sort of cracks quite easily, or comes apart quite easily. So the first thing you have to do with polymer clay before you use it for anything is to condition it. And conditioning it warms up the clay. It gets all the plasticizers and other elements within the clay to start to bond and sort of bring the material together so it's more workable. And it will also mean when you cure it that it cures really strong and doesn't crack. So there's 2 ways of conditioning polymer clay. You can do it by hand, and what I'm doing now is just working with the clay, just warming it up with my hands, and also moving it around and sort of just getting it to start be a bit movable. And the other way you can, along with your hands, utilize your acrylic roller to just start working with the clay, getting it mixed back up together. Now, so aside from working with conditioning polymer clay but with your hands, you can utilize a pasta machine, and makers do this and have been doing this for ages. So just a good old pasta machine. And one thing to say though, with using that any kind of equipment you start to use for polymer clay, you can't then use for pasta or whatever it was used for before. So anything from the kitchen that you're using for polymer clay, once it gets used with clay, it stays in the studio. It doesn't go back into the kitchen. So that's starting to get more flexible just even by working with it by hand. So what I'm going to do though is run it through a pasta machine I've just got off to camera. And you'll start to see how it starts to kind of come together. It's still cracking on the side, so it's still not 100% conditioned or ready to work with. But I'm just running it through a pasta machine off to the side. This can all be done with hands and with a roller. And you'll know when your clay is conditioned because it will start to fold over without cracking, and it will just feel like it's ready to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in a second with this clay beautifully conditioned. Okay, I now have a piece of black clay that's really nicely conditioned. You can see it's all really smooth, it's flexible, it's warmed up. When you're conditioning clay, the one thing you do want to watch for is any bubbles in the clay. And as you see them, if you see them as you're conditioning them, you can pop them with your blade and just release the air and keep conditioning. Because if you have any kind of bubbles in your clay, once it's cured, those bubbles, the air will expand and turn into a cured bubble. So I can't see any huge bubbles in this. I know I'm going to texture this sheet a lot, and that will actually cover a lot of the bubbles. So, and there's going to be some more clay that goes on the top of this. So I have rolled this out to be about a bit over between 3 and 4 mil thick. There's a few ways you can determine the thickness of your clay through the machine. By eye is fine, especially for a trinket dish. You can also utilize depth guides, which you can purchase or make out of wooden sticks or pieces of cardboard, etc. So the clay now is ready for me to put the colour on. Okay, what I've done now is condition all of the accent colour clay, and I've rolled it really, really thin, like paper thin, as thin as it will go, so that they're ready now to tear up and add to the slab. So while I do this for a little bit, so what we're doing is we're making a polymer clay slab. The book has several polymer clay slab. Not only does it have, talking about polymer clay slabs as a technique, it also has several projects in it, including this one. So the basics of a slab are piece of background clay that is thick enough, that is a certain thickness, decorations put on top. Then you can either decide to roll those decorations into the background slab, or you can leave it raised. And then texture can be added, all kinds of things can be added. And then usually what happens is that slab is cut into shapes, most popularly earrings can be made out of the slab, or other things like a trinket dish or a wall hanging, or all kinds of things. So it's a wonderfully simple technique with very much so sky's the limit with what you can do with it. So as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm just tearing small pieces of clay and just placing them on the slab. I'm trying to sort of rotate between the colours to get a random even distribution. We're going to start sort of overlapping the pieces too. And that's the thing with a slab, or one aspect of doing a slab, because you're possibly going to cut lots of small pieces, is to distribute your pattern evenly. Squint a lot, check where you've got gaps, and make sure that the whole thing is covered nice and evenly. So I'm just going to keep doing this. What I might end up doing is coming back when it's all covered up. So I will do a little bit of overlapping. Now, ultimately what we're going to do with this is add some texture to the negative space within the slab, which is the black background. So bearing that in mind, I don't want to cover. I don't want these little torn pieces to cover the entire slab so we can't see any of the black. At the same time, I don't want too much because you want a lot of colour on there. So it's a fine line, but I'm hoping to give you a good sense of sort of how far to take it. And I've chosen 4 colours here. You could choose 2, you could choose 6, you could choose more, less, and obviously, of course, any colour combination you like. That's the beauty of this technique, which doesn't require any skill. We're not talking about caning, we're not talking about anything else. This is just such a lovely, easy and fun, wait till we get to the texturing, that is super fun, project to do. If you're brand new to polymer clay, this is a really, really wonderful project to just get you in and addicted. So I'm just going to keep, you can see I'm building up, slowly building up the pattern across the slab. I feel like I just need to keep making sure I'm covering the black and adding all the colours in that we want to add. Okay, what you can see now is the slab itself has been nicely evenly covered with the torn clay pieces. I've overlapped them. There's a good coverage of different colours and enough sort of negative and positive space for what I want to do. You can see that it's not flat yet. So the next step now is to roll in the accent coloured clay. Now, rolling clay, firm but also gentle. You're just wanting to add like an even pressure across, and the beauty of these rollers, as you can see through them. The other important thing when working with slabs is to pick them up and rotate them in between rolls. It's not so much of an issue with this abstract slab, but when you're working with more definitive shapes, you don't want the rotating. What that means is you get an even spread, because as you roll this top clay into the base, you are making the slab thinner and it does spread out. So in order to avoid distortion, you're picking it up and rotating it as you go. Now, this is where you can use depth guides to get yourself to an even level. For this kind of a project, it's perfectly fine to go by eye and feel to see how thin you want it to go and whether it feels even. You can tell by rolling it over. So as you can see, the clay is now getting much more integrated into the slab. So I'm thinking just a few more rolls and then it'll be time to texture. And you could stop here. You don't have to texture it. You could stop here and go straight to making your trinket dish. So that's as much as I'm going to roll it in. Before I texture it, I'm just going to check with the mold that I'm going to use that there's enough of the slab by just placing it over. I'm not going to put it on yet, but yes, there's enough of the slab and I want to do something else with the extra bit of clay. So that's fine. We've got plenty of clay to make our dish. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how I'm going to texture this. So I thought I'd come and show you up close how I'm going to texture this slab. I've got a really small, simple balling tool, and all I'm going to do is just gently press into the clay in all of the negative black space. Now, whenever I'm talking about texturing, my one piece of advice is to do it carefully and mindfully. There's nothing worse than messy texturing. And with this type of sort of hammered effect, you do really need to sort of do your texturing, like don't leave any gaps in between your texturing. Just take, this is a wonderfully calming, therapeutic activity. And what I love about this technique, you can see it already, how it transforms the black clay to just something else. It darkens it, it adds texture. It also means the coloured clay pops even more. So what I will do is I'm going to just do a little bit more of this, and then I'll come back when it's all done. But this is so easy, so satisfying. It just brings it to another level. Okay, so now I've textured the whole slab in between all the colours in the negative space, and you can see just how much it adds to the texture and to the pattern. even more so when it's turned into a curved Trinket dish. So the next step is to cut out a circle for it to go into our mold. So what I tend to do with the Trinket dishes is I'll use the Trinket dish itself as a template. You can use large circle cutters, but I tend to like to cut them out by hand. So what I'm going to do is just put it where I know I'm going to get enough clay. And what I tend to do is this does not have to be super neat. I will just, by hand using a craft knife, just cut a circle just a few millimeters bigger than the dish itself. Just a little bit. So just by hand, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so what I then do is carefully take the dish off, put that to the side. Then what I'm going to do is peel off this. We're going to come back to this in a second. And then what we've got is the remaining circle. What you can do is use your tissue blade to lift it off the tile or glass surface if it's a little bit stuck. So now is the time to get your circle of clay into your mold. So there's nothing you need to do to the mold to prep it. And it's just a matter of carefully, gently coaxing the clay into the mold. So what I'm just doing is gently stretching the clay, and what I tend to do is peel back and let the air out that's underneath. And you're working the clay all the time into the bottom edges of the mold. You need to work out all the air. Any air that's left underneath the clay and between the mold will turn into an air bubble. Don't worry about fingerprints at this point. We can clean them up later. So you just gently, always, that's getting there. So just feel still not quite, it's got to touch it. This is a nice mold too, it's quite shallow. Deeper molds like this one are harder to work the clay in. You have to stretch it much more. So that's feeling good. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, as you can see, there's a little bit of overhang of the clay in the mold, and that's absolutely fine. It's better to have a bit of overhang, hence why I made it, cut it just that little bit bigger. Okay. So still just feels like a little bit of air there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now with my craft knife is just carefully trim any excess clay just by pressing the blade against the dish. And using it as a guide. Any bits sort of don't come off great, you can press them back together. We'll come back to that and tidy that up. Okay, so this bit here I'll be able to fix up before I put it in the oven and after it comes out of the oven. So this does not have to be perfect at this point. However, you may want to, before it goes in the oven, you may want to smooth all this down with your fingers and curve the edges a little bit, or if you want them sharp edged, flat edged, you can. What I'm going to do here is push this bit out. Tidy it up. I always sand my pieces, which I'll show you when they come out of the oven, but you can choose to tidy it up beforehand, which is no problem at all. So when you feel like you're finished with it and ready for it to be cured, what I tend to do is just do a quick wipe over with the pad of my finger to just remove any fingerprints that might be on the clay after, you know, working with it, working it into the mold. So just by gently rubbing my finger across it, that will get rid of it. Okay, so I'm just going to put that to the side and then come back to our leftover bit of slab. Now there's quite a bit left, and I'm going to cut out some shapes to make into some simple earrings as well. So what I might do is grab some cutters. Now in the book there's a whole section on using cutters and all the different kinds of cutters that are out there. So I'm going to do that circle there. I'm going to do that circle there. I'm also going to grab a really nice 3D printed cutter that I can use here. So I'm just pressing down on that firmly and evenly, pulling it out. It's fine that it's stuck to the slab. I prefer it when it does that. Pop that. There. And what I might do with the bits left over is some studs, some mega studs. So do one there, two, then get a smaller size, and even using this little bit here, 1, 2, 3, and now if it comes out in the cutter, that is also fine. Using the pad of one of your fingers, you can pop it out gently. We can put that on our paper in a second. Okay, that one's come out again. Smaller cutters will be more likely to do that. So what I'm doing now is just getting rid of the skeleton, and in the book I also talk a lot about utilising scraps or leftovers, and these types of skeletons, there's lots of super fun things you can do with these. So I'll be doing something else with these. I will not be throwing them away. The least you could do is mix this up again and get sort of another dark black colour. So polymer clay scraps are always usable. So what I'm going to do now to get ready for everything to go into the oven is I've got some printer paper here, just some copy paper. What I'm going to do is just start lifting these off the tile and just putting them carefully on the paper. Don't keep uncured clay on paper for long. What will happen is the oils in the clay will start to leach onto the paper and weaken the clay. So I only ever put clay onto copy paper when I'm ready for it to go into the oven. Curing clay, follow the instructions of the clay brand you have used, and if you've mixed brands, that's certainly absolutely fine. What I tend to do is sort of average out the different temperatures and times, and I've never had a problem with that. So these pieces are now going to go into the oven for the allocated time, and I'll come back and show you how to finish the dish. Okay, everything's now been cured and taken out of the oven and cooled down. So just watch these. The dishes will be hot when they come out of the oven. So as you can see, this is stuck in the mold, but it will come out easily. So what we're going to do is just slowly but surely and carefully lift, and it's just come out super easily. And there you've got your dish. Just kidding. Now for finishing, what I'm going to do to finish this dish is I'm going to use, to start with, a rotary tool with a sandpaper attachment, and I'm going to use that to just take the edge off the lip. You can do it with sandpaper by hand, but I'm going to start with using this to take the edge off and do a pretty rough sand job around the edge, and then come back over with some wet and dry 400 grit sandpaper. So I'm going to then do that, and I'm also going to sand the whole bottom as well and get this shine off. That shine is from the mold, from where it touched the shiny ceramic surface. So I'm going to do that. I'm also going to, out of these, I'm going to finish up these two components and turn those into some little hoop earrings, and I'll show you just how much better they look after a good hand sand. So I'll come back with these sanded completely and we'll go from there. Okay, so these pieces have all been sanded now. We did a first sort of rough sand with the rotary tool. Then I went with some 400 grits wet and dry sandpaper and sanded all of the edges and the back. I did not sand the pattern at all. There's no need to sand that. And it's all feeling really smooth and nice and looking really well finished. These pieces too, which I'm going to turn into a little pair of earrings, I've also sanded the edges with sandpaper, wet and dry. You'll see when you use cutters that the cutters will push the colour down onto the side, and that's where the sanding really cleans that up. I go through all of this in the book. So these now are ready to turn into some earrings. Before I finish them off though, you may find, especially with darker colours, you'll get some light sort of casting after sanding. Now you can buff that off if you want to take it that far. You can certainly buff and shine polymer clay to an absolute glass finish. But if I'm not wanting to do that, what I will do is use one of two things. There's this product called Renaissance Wax, which is like a buffing polish that artisans use. I will also use Vaseline as well. I find that gives just as good a finish. So, and I find that you only need a very small amount. And what I'll do is just rub that all over the edges, everywhere I've sanded, and it will remove any light sanding marks, and it will also just make everything, just give it a really subtle sheen, which I really like. And I've used Vaseline on all of my earring pieces when they've been, after they've been sanded. Now with the sanding, I will just say safety, eye protection and breathing protection. Make sure you're sanding in a well ventilated area. I will add, I'll just say I add the oil to the surface as well. And if I've got this kind of textured pattern, what I will sometimes do is just grab a brush, a soft clean brush, put a bit of the oil on it and just rub that in to the surface where our fingers can't get to. And I don't know if you can see that, that's just starting to shine a little bit, and that shine will stay. So that's those. I'm going to do the same thing to the earrings. Always rub it on the sides and then the top as well. I'm going to use a brush just to get into the details. And aside from some holes in these, I'm going to just finish these with a hole in each one and some little hoops. So I'm just using a hand drill for some one-off holes. Polymer clay is really soft. If I'm doing lots and lots of holes, I'll use my rotary tool and eye protection. This is quite simple. And we're just doing 2 holes, so I can do it by hand. So I'm just going to grab some hoops. I'm going to thread them through. We could have made earrings with some coloured tops on them, whatever you want to make with that extra bit of slab before or after cutting out your circle for your trinket dish. And there we have it. You've got some lovely hoop arch earrings and a trinket dish you could put them in. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to buy the book. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram and Facebook, and thank you again. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have as much fun exploring polymer clay as I have. You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on my website, everywhere pretty much online. So thanks again for watching.